do you have any disagreements with the objectivist philosophy?
I don't know. I've over the last several months or so, I've been wondering if I have some different disagreements or in the area of meta ethics. So like the issues like the ultimate value, like is the ultimate value life, or is it happiness? Is it both? Are they just different ways of looking at the same sort of thing? I've had discussions about these sorts of topics with other objectivists, and the discussions have made me at least question whether I have a different view than Rand on some of these meta-ethical issues. So I'm not sure. I think hedonism is a topic I've been thinking about over the last several months or a year. Like, if you understand hedonism in a certain way, could it be compatible with objectivism? Like, if hedonism just means do whatever you feel like in the moment, it's clearly not compatible with objectivism. That would be like whim worship.
Mm-hmm.
But if hedonism just means pleasure is the highest value and happiness is a form of pleasure, well, is that very different than what Rand says? I mean, she says happiness is the moral purpose. Properly, it's the moral purpose of one's life. Well, if hedonism is just making a claim about what the ultimate value is or the highest value, well, I don't think that's too far afield from what Rand is saying when she says happiness is the highest purpose. So it depends on how exactly you understand hedonism. I read a dissertation by someone several months ago who's argued actually that I think his argument is that Rand's view is consistent with hedonism, or at least hedonism, if you understand it in a certain way, is consistent with Ayn Rand's view. If you understand it in a very narrow way, as I mentioned, like it's just whim worship, do whatever you want in the moment, then it's obviously not compatible. But I think even like Epicurus, ancient Greek philosopher who's commonly associated with hedonism, even he thought that was not a correct approach. It was kind of a straw man, I think, of his view. So there are some of these sorts of issues which I'm not sure I have the same view as Rand, but maybe I do. You know, maybe if I had a 3-hour conversation with her and tried to hash all this out,
right? Sure.
Maybe she'd say, okay, yeah, maybe if you interpret it that way, then I could get on board with that. I don't know.
What is so that pleasure and happiness are just not the same thing, is what she's emphasizing, and happiness is really a long range prospect. But not to say that pleasure, range of the moment pleasure, is always wrong. Like, you know, I like getting a cheeseburger, you know, once in a while. And so I think as long as it's consistent with your long range well-being and flourishing.
Yeah, there are different senses of pleasure. So there is the kind of immediate sensory pleasure, but there's also what you might call intellectual or emotional pleasures, like joy or happiness. So, so these terms are they have different senses, and I think it's important to be clear on exactly what you mean by a certain term. So if you mean a certain thing by pleasure, it's clearly not compatible with Rand's view that pleasure is the highest good. But if you mean something else by pleasure, maybe something more like happiness or flourishing or well-being, then maybe that is compatible. So I don't think there's like a one-line answer that can decide the issue. Some of these issues you just have to have discussions with people and figure out exactly what they mean by terms, what senses they're using the terms, to figure out what exactly the claim is that's being made, whether it's consistent with objectivism, whether it's rights. So, but there is another issue though, which I've written some about on my Selfishness Project website and also on Harry Binswanger's forum, which is the dictionary definition of selfishness. I don't know if you're aware of any of that, but in the introduction to the virtue of selfishness, Ayn Rand says that, quote, the exact meaning and dictionary definition of selfishness is concern with one's own interests, unquote, or at least something very close to that. So many people have noticed, well, if you actually look in a dictionary, what you find is typically not what she says there. So concern with one's own interests, that's usually not what you find in a dictionary, yet she says that's the dictionary definition of selfishness. What you usually find is something like concern with one's own interests at the expense of others.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be a point where I have a disagreement. Like, was she actually right about what the dictionary definition of selfishness is? I'm not sure that she was, at least I have some doubts. Now, some people have tried to interpret that statement to mean, oh, she wasn't saying this is what the dictionary definition is. It's what, rather, she's saying this is what the dictionary definition should be. What she means is this is the proper dictionary definition. And I'm not sure that's the right interpretation of what she says, but some people have put that forward as a way to address this criticism that she's falsely claiming that the dictionary definition is concerned with one's own interest.
I guess which dictionary, maybe in the 50s or 40s when she cracked one open, then today the altruists corrupted it or something.
I've looked into that. I've looked into dictionaries going back hundreds of years. They're all basically, not all of them. There are some that are, I think, pretty much what she says, but it's a small minority. I think the large majority, going back for centuries, I've looked in Samuel Johnson's dictionary, I think of the 1700s. Going back that far, it's got the package deal sort of definition, as it's often called, where it packages in concern with your own interest with harm to others. So yeah, it's not just a recent phenomenon. I've even looked in the dictionaries that we know Ayn Rand herself made use of, because sometimes she references in an article, she's giving the dictionary definition of some term, and she'll say, like, this was the American Heritage Dictionary of 1968 or whatever, or the Random House Dictionary of 1968. Well, I've tracked down as many of these particular dictionaries that she cites as I could. I think there are like about 5 of them. And even in those dictionaries, they have the package deal sort of definition of selfishness. The closest one I've found to hers is, it's different by only one word, but I think it's an important word, which is, quote, concern only with one's own interests, unquote. So that word only, I think, is important, because I think the way that's most reasonably interpreted is that you don't care about others' interests at all. You're just a jerk to others. You're rude to others. You only care about your own interests. Now, there's a way of interpreting that only such that it is compatible with her view. Like, if you take it to mean like primarily or fundamentally concerned with your own interests, yeah, I think you could say that is her view. But I don't think that's how lexicographers probably intend it. I mean, they're trying to reflect common usage. I think that's what a dictionary is trying to do. It's trying to capture how this word is typically used. I mean, that's the value of a dictionary. If you want to know what you hear some new word and you're not sure what it means, you look up in a dictionary to see what someone probably meant by it. And I think what most people probably meant by it, and what the dictionary is trying to capture when they say concern only with your own interests, is that you don't care about others, and you're kind of rude or a jerk. You're doing things at their expense. I think that's the best interpretation of this concern only with one's own interests sort of definition.
It's psychopathy, like with you debated, I think it was an English guy or Welsh or something. You guys kind of got hampered on the idea of psychopathy or criminality.
Oh, right.
And the only reason you would feel guilty for, I guess, killing someone for money or stealing is because you were socialized well as a kid. And so, like, we're animals, we have to be socialized to behave. It's like we don't have free will or reason, and we can't, I guess, introspect that it's taking us kind of out of harmony with reality to commit crime.
Right. Yeah. So that bridges to a somewhat different topic. So just to kind of tie up that last thread. So you asked about, like, do I have any differences or disagreements with Ayn Rand? So there's the meta ethical issues, which I'm not sure I disagree on. I just have questions about. And then, but there's also this issue of the dictionary definitions of selfishness. I think there's a good chance I have a disagreement on her over what the dictionary definition of it is, but there's still questions of interpretation. What exactly was she saying, or what did she mean by saying this is the dictionary definition? But I think there's a good chance, at least, that I have a disagreement there.